So, who here does the rebooks themselves? Show of hands. Quite a few. Who here employs an agency to do the rebooks for you? Okay, not so many people. Might be hearing about the advantages of using an agency to do rebooks. And who here doesn't do rebooks at all? Okay, that's interesting. And it brings me on to, well, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, but it does bring me on to Dan first, because you were in a very similar position, weren't you? You decided that you didn't want to do rebooks when you first launched your show. So tell our audience about your show and why you took the decision not to do rebooks in the first year.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me this morning. My name's Dan Cockerton. I run the digital accountancy show. We are a technology and transformation exhibition for accountants and finance professionals. We did our third show this year. First year we didn't do a rebook. Second year we did, and this year we did. And as a business, I'm actually the only full-time employee in the business. We use freelancers, so I have, just to paint some context, we have a freelance sales team, freelance marketing, freelance content. And in terms of revenue, we're about £1 million this year in terms of the event. In our first year, which was 2021, I just kind of sold myself the idea that I didn't need to or didn't want to do a rebook. What I told myself was, you know, we've got to make the show good enough, and then the rebooking process will kind of sort itself out after the show. And I just spent kind of 12 months working on the relationships, 12 months kind of working on the client base. I then felt like I didn't want to put the pressure on the clients on the day, and actually it's just something I didn't want to do myself. So in year one, that's the main reason why we didn't do it. And then, shall I move on?
Yeah, I was going to ask, if you don't mind me prying, does that resonate with you? Okay, cool, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but I'm sure it does resonate with a lot of people. It is that whole thing of my event should be able to stand on its own 2 feet, and if it's good enough, people will want to rebook automatically. But maybe one of you can tell us why is that not the greatest idea?
Well, so we joined Collingwood Advisory, so we're part of their Startup Crescent program. That really kind of their Crescent program, they work with startups and help them kind of get the fundamentals right in their business. And working with our advisor there in the business was a guy called Chris Kilby. And Chris Kilby said to me during our kind of program, well, first of all, think about the time that you're going to get back by not having to resell all to those clients. So if we're talking about kind of 40, 50 exhibitors that you rebook, that's 40 to 50 hours in time that I'm going to get back to be able to kind of build a business and work on new business and getting new exhibitors into the event. So that was kind of the first thing. And then the second thing was, he also said, in terms of me not wanting to actually do the rebook and put the pressure on the clients, did you know that like businesses like Debbie exist, which I didn't at the time. So we now employ a model where we have a mixture of our sales team and Debbie's sales team working on the floor, working on the exhibition stands and signing up those stands for the following year. In our second year, we had a 50% rebook rate, and this year we hit 60%.
Fantastic. And Debbie, tell everybody about your company. And you must hear this kind of story all the time. Salespeople that spend a lot of time building relationships with exhibitors, and when it actually comes down to the crunch, the pressure moment of getting them to sign a new contract for the following year, they're a little bit cautious because they've done so much to build those relationships in the first place.
Yeah, hi everyone. Debbie Lee from Benchmark Collective. We are, as you've probably worked out, an outsourced rebook consultancy business. I thought it was interesting, pretty much everyone in this room who is an organiser said that they rebook. And that's what we find, whether they're independent organisers or obviously big, kind of the headline companies that we all think of when we think about event organisers. They do it, but it's quite often seen as a kind of tick box exercise. It's not a focused customer service project. So for organisers like Dan, where it is a resource decision as much as a emotional decision, it's always overcoming that idea that you own the relationships, you don't want to push people, and getting a third party in particular, which is obviously what we do, it takes a huge amount of trust to do that. If you're a larger organiser, you've got the resource. Quite often offices are emptied to go and do a rebook because salespeople like it. But actually what happens sometimes is obviously those other projects are being kind of detrimentally affected by their time away from their desks. And for independent organisers, it's no time to plan it, no time to follow it up. So you tend to do it badly. You just run around with a few contracts and hope that some people will take you up on it. And that feels very transactional. It doesn't feel very consultative. And that's really what we do. You know, most independent organisers we're fortunate enough to work with, we now work with before the event, during the event, and in the immediate aftermath, because we can take that off them. Dan even got a holiday, didn't you, after your event last year? So that we could follow up in that cool-off period. It's a model that works and feels comfortable in the end, but we don't normally start there.
I did notice there was quite a few nodding heads when you were talking about it being quite transactional, people running around with contracts. So a more structured process that starts even before the exhibition and then carries on during. Tell us a little bit more about that. As I guess before the exhibition is all about emails, it's all about communication.
It's really shocking. It's about picking up the phone and talking to customers.
People don't do that anymore, do they?
Well, yeah, they do. Some do. Sweeping generalisations I don't want to make. But I'm going back to the time thing. Like, you're selling up to the line. You're doing all the other practical things that you need to do as an independent organiser that's wearing 5 different hats. I think it's about giving your customers the benefit of the understanding of what the opportunity is. And this session's about language. I think that's the bit that gets missed. It's not, if it feels like order taking, if it's a one-dimensional, do you want it or not conversation, it's easy for them to say, no, I don't. You've got to be, as an independent organiser, you're almost leaning on that relationship you've built more by having a focused Rebook project, because they want the event to grow. You obviously want the event to grow. You've got to work together to do that and understand what they're looking at for the next 12 months, how they might want to interact with your brand. Is it just stand space? Is it sponsorship? Is it, content? Whatever it is. And what I hear time and time again is we don't have time to talk to all our customers about that before we get to the show. So more often than not, key accounts, top 5, the big guys you need to get in, we leave in the hands of our clients, and then we pick up everyone else.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah.
The two kind of big benefits for us in that kind of pre-comms before the show itself, and why that's so important, is one, it kind of sets the level of expectation. So on the day of the event, this year we were a 1-day event, next year we go to 2 days, but it really sets that level of expectation with the exhibitor that somebody will be coming around on the day to see them. It gives the guys and Debbie's team or my team the opportunity to book the meeting in advance as well to try and get that deal done. And also, and one of the guys this year for us signed up a fairly big stand for us for next year. So to have that revenue locked in before we've even run the show is massive. So
that must be a good feeling.
Yeah, it really is, yeah.
Fantastic. And obviously trust is a huge part of that as well, as we said before. What tends to happen at exhibitions, I guess, is that the Rebook agency has a stand, some kind of presence there. But it tends to be tucked away somewhere at the back. You're a little bit embarrassed at the Rebook agency, you stick them at the back. But actually that's not the right strategy, is it? You want to actually highlight the fact that a Rebook agency is working there, and the benefits of having a stand in the middle of the show. Is that too much?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we did this year. Last year we had a room out the back in the corner of the venue. We did our first 2 shows at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is an amazing venue if anybody's running events, which everyone obviously is. But we had a room at the back, and the sales team would kind of escort the exhibitors and decision makers out there. But what we did this year, which worked really, really well, was we had a stand right in the middle of the exhibition floor. It was one of the bigger stands. We had the floor plan on the big screen like this, and the team could just go on, put the kind of stickers on the map and secure those stands. And what it did was create a big buzz and hype around the stand, and all the exhibitors could see all the other exhibitors going up to the stand, and it created an amazing atmosphere around the stand, and I think really helped us this year go from 50% to 60% in terms of Rebook. But you've got to have people there to man it, because we had quite a lot of people kind of come and ask general questions, didn't we? But yeah, would you add anything to that, Debbie, from a stand perspective?
I was going to say it must be quite difficult to staff it if you're relying on people getting out and talking to exhibitors.
Well, yeah, I mean, on an independent event like Dan's, you're representing your brand, and I think the idea of putting a little spare 9 square meters that you happen to have not sold in the corner as your sales lounge is an opportunity really missed. If you think of it that way, I'm sure a lot of you that said you do Rebook, understand the concept of the theatre of the floor plan, having it up on the wall. But it's also a bit more than that. It's your next edition's branding. It's your other editions that you want to launch. It's actually representing some of your sponsorship opportunities on your sales lounge, and making it a nice place for your exhibiting clients to actually come and hang out. So having somewhere for them to sit down and talk to us, and having that central location makes a huge difference. It's kind of almost apologising a bit for the fact that you're doing a Rebook when you stick it in the corner by the toilets. I'm not saying that you did that to me, Dan. It's a chance to shout about your brand, your next edition, and that's really important part of the jigsaw puzzle. So there's the preparation for your clients, getting everything together for that. I appreciate takes time on your part when there's not perhaps a big team to do that. But in that first year, it's a struggle, but you're buying yourself time at the end of the sales cycle to do that, the next time round. So it's always tricky the first year that you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the other big benefit to having the Rebook stand in the middle of the show floor this year as well was the new business. So we had a number of people coming around to scope out the event with 2024 in mind, and we did about 50 grand's worth of new business just by having a visible stand in the middle of the floor. So it's great for new business people and people that we didn't even know were at the show. Like there were potential exhibitors there that I had no idea were there, and because they saw the stand, they signed up for the following year.
Yeah, fantastic. Does anybody else do that? Have their Rebook stand front and centre, middle of the show, and you find the same results, do you? Have we got a microphone that we can actually take out to the audience? Or maybe shout. We'd like to hear your views. And if you've got any questions for our panellists as well, that would be great. We've got about 5 minutes left, so let's open it out and talk about Rebooks. You got any? Is there a microphone? No? There's only one on stage. Okay. Yeah, I really like the idea of new exhibitors like wandering around your show, and they don't actually have to come and talk to you or find out who the best person to speak to. They can just go and find the Rebook stand and sign up for next year. That must be a good feeling after you finish the show to find, and it allows you to concentrate as well on additional revenue streams like content and sponsorship and all the rest of it. Yeah. Anybody else?
So I guess it's hard to pricing like that part of the market. Are they buying perspective on okay counter to like what's the negatives around that business now going and have any
Yeah, it's a really good point, again, because having a floor plan for the following year, it's tough enough getting the floor plan right for that year, isn't it?
Yeah, and as Debbie will know, we were making changes on literally the day of the event as well, which kind of caused a bit of a panic or whatever. But you've got to be prepared. That's one thing you do have to be. But my kind of view on it is, well, and my business partner's view on it is, well, let's get the floor plan done. Let's make a decision, and let's just book them in regardless. You know, let's get them sign the contract. Let's get the deal done. And if we need to kind of go back to them at a later date with changes to the floor plan or whatever it might be, which we are probably going to do, then that's kind of my view on it, really. Debbie, would you add anything?
I think it comes back to those kind of conversations you're having with your customers. If you're consultative with them and you understand why they booked that space, is it because they were next to that particular theatre? Is it because they were next to another brand? And you capture all that. When you do need to make changes, which everyone does have to make changes at some point, usually throughout the year, you go back to them and you continue that consultative conversation. I think that's how you achieve it. But you do have to put a stake in the ground on your pricing. We've done rebooks without floor plans, I should also add. It's not always essential to have a floor plan. It depends if location is the biggest driver. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about, obviously, your brand and how well established you are and how much you're growing. And also pricing is another factor. You know, they're going to save themselves some money. But our motto is always don't sell on that scarcity in your rebook conversation, because it feels, again, a little bit threatening, a little bit transactional. It's not about book now or you'll lose your space and pay more. It's book now because the event is going here and we've got this planned and we're growing and these are your opportunities. Very different language to the book now, sign here, or I'm going to charge you more tomorrow.
Yeah, language is really important. I was going to ask, do prices always rise, or is it an early bird? There's an early bird element, but again, it's how you express it, how the language you use.
Yeah, with our show, we always increase the prices year on year. We have done for the last 3 years anyway. But what we do on site is, well, the prices are increasing. Just if you book now, yours won't increase by so much.
Yeah.
They tend to quite like that.
Yeah. But the priority should be on the language of the show developing, you developing with the show.
Of the
opportunities, building community.
Opportunity language, not scarcity language. And price increases are fine if there's a reason why you need to increase your prices. You can't always put your price up year on year necessarily. It depends what your costs are doing. Obviously, all of that strategic thinking has to happen before you set your prices. But you can deliver a price increase message in a rebook as long as you can justify it. You can freeze prices in a rebook, which is what most people tend to do if they're happy with where they are. And a rebook is also a great time to level your prices when we walk into a situation where perhaps they might be a little bit all over the place. And on independent shows, that can be the case because obviously you've had to get these people through the door. You're 2 years in, 3 years in, they're literally everywhere in terms of who's paying what. That transparency needs to kind of come in at some point so that everyone's leveled out, and a rebook is a fantastic time to do that.
Yeah, and as you said, the strategic thinking happening before the show goes live frees up a lot of time after the show when you would normally be chasing your tail trying to do those kind of things.
I realise it depends on the duration of the price. So if you have a kind of ballpark figure for the stand per salesperson for rebook.
I'll tell you my magic formula. So it depends if you've done a pre-book as well, because all the things that Dan was saying about warming everyone up, flushing out objections, are the decision makers on site, do we need to have a solution if they're not? If all of that's done, we usually work to a ratio of 10 customers per rebooker per day of your event. So if you have a 2-day show, you don't really want to give each rebooker more than about 20 customers to have meaningful conversations and to not leave money on the floor. There's nothing worse than giving them 40 and they just don't get to them.
Fantastic. Oh.
What about cooling off periods?
That really varies based on your customer base and what type of sector you're in. So public sector events, you need a cool off. We don't always do a standardised cool off. it can be case by case based on that company. And you know, some of your big key clients are not necessarily going to quite get there with all their red lines they have to get through, but you have to have that consultative conversation beforehand and perhaps consider talking to them about where they want to be. They're committed to the event, they're going to be there, hold that space for them. It certainly helps with momentum, but their call off could be significantly longer than perhaps you'd give to everyone else.
I think we've got time for one or two more. We've got 2 minutes? 2 minutes, yeah.
That's led by your customers, right? So you sometimes with a show Dan's got some really big names at his event and they start quite small. So if you understand those brands and perhaps what other events they do, what sometimes organisers don't do is lift up and out and talk to their clients about which other events they perhaps exhibit at and think about their budgets and how they use their money and what they're trying to achieve. I know that sounds really like 101, doesn't it? But if you know that, then you're better to sell them at that point. It also depends who's there, right? So sometimes these marketing directors are not in front of you, they're the sales guys. So you've got to balance that. Get them on the floor, yes. Get something in there, let's have a consultative conversation afterwards, but it's not one size fits all, the answer to that, sorry.
Last point.
Question for Dan. You mentioned that you have this was 40%.
Yeah, it's normally just not the right person being on site. Either that or we are planning our budgets later on in the year, can't commit to it right now. You always get a certain percentage there, they just don't have a good show for whatever reason. But it's normally the right person isn't on site. We do go down the call-off period, so we do try and push the fact they've got 14 or 28 days, depending on who it is, to call off if they want to. So that's kind of the main thing that we use, but it tends to be the decision maker not being on site, and if that's kind of the end of it, we can't really do too much about that.
Not on a one-day show anyway. You haven't got any. Dan's event is a one-day event, so if you have 2-3 days, you have time to kind of work on that a bit more and get in touch with the right person. Again, a pre-book helps with that. Dan was also changing Dateline, weren't you, this year? So that was another reason why some of those guys were like, oh, okay, we're moving to a different month. We've probably got to work that through a little bit more. So I think that was one of the factors this year as well, would you say?
Cool, thank you very much. Debbie and Dan, you're going to be around for the rest of the day? Are you coming
Sound
to
like
the
a
awards?
double act, Debbie and Dan.
You coming to the awards tonight? Maybe.
Sadly not.
Okay, but you'll be around for the rest of today. So if anybody's got any other questions, nab them in the networking theatre. And thank you very much.